A good trick Friday afternoon when you're looking what to do with the kids. Because I've learned this a while ago, and I've mentioned this. Nice kosher entertainment. You take them to, I do anyway. From time to time, I take them to a car wash. Now, you see, if somebody would come up with a ride in Six Flags or something, where your car goes through on a track and big things turn and it gets flushed with water and suds and everything, they would charge $25 a head for the ride. Okay, but being that it's just a car wash, so it's considerably cheaper. And I tell the kids that the car is going to the mikveh for Shabbos. That's we have to do it, and they have a blast. It's a lot of fun for a kid in a car wash. Things happening and the suds, the big machines turning and everything. And also the gentleman that works over there, he already has they already knows my kids. So they wave at him and he shoots the power jet, the water at them, and the problem is they're getting a little smart. As he was shooting the water, they were opening the window, closing the window, opening it, closing it, and then they missed. They didn't close it in time. They ducked, but I got spritzed from. At least my glasses were clean. The very strong detergent. So I noticed this. A car wash is an interesting experience with my car because you see it does leak in from different places. So we get an interior wash also. But I noticed as I pulled out, so we came home, and I came out, and I turned around, and something caught my eye, and I turned around, and I noticed, like in the sun, there's like a nice glare from a nice clean car, and the hubcaps, and for a second I stopped and said, "Who cleaned the car?" And I forgot I was in the car wash. The reason I forgot is because the purpose of the car wash wasn't to clean the car. The purpose of the car wash was don't tell anybody, entertainment. But I totally forgot that in the process the car was clean. The reason being, the Musar Haskell being, that in the course of our lives, we go through many an experience. And we go through that experience thinking that we came here for purpose A. And at the end it's purpose B that has absolutely no shaykhus thing. And I want to get around to this by first pointing out that today, Yud Ches Elul, or today was, Yartzeit goes into the night as well, like Kachim, which the night was after the day, is the Yartzeit of the Maharal Me Prague, Rav Yehuda ben Rav Vitzal Eloi, who was nifter 5,369 years to the creation of the world. The secular date would be August 22nd, 1609. Now, I know most people, if you were to play the game of associative reasoning, when you say the Maharal Me Prague, what do you think of? The golem, right? Which is in a way not fair to the Maharal, who was a person that saved Klal Yisrael to a certain extent, if you understand the history. Both being the shliach to be the political savior as the king, he was considered the Kaiser's rabbiner, through being the chief rabbi of Germany at that time, of Prussia, that entire area, Bohemia, and more than that, in the Messiah of Torah. There were many who said about the Maharal that it's the Yisoid for the writings of the Gra and the Yisoid of the writings for the Baal Shem Tov. That it included both. And if you think about how many Svarim throughout the ages that are based on the Sifrei Maharal. But yet, when you say Maharal, what do we think of? Think of the golem. Now, as you know, there is much controversy about the golem, about Yasla golem, that saved all of the Jews against the blood libels during this time period, and the Maharal allegedly created the golem. There are some who argue that the story of the golem has to be true. V'haraya, they sell souvenirs and little golems in Prague, in the store, so that proves it. That's one proof. And of course, the folklore over the years that has developed around the different things of the golem. I remember once I had a teacher that said, I don't want to say the word Rabbi, but he said, not to me, but he said to someone sitting next to me, and I really felt bad. The guy asked a question which wasn't a very good question, and his response to that was, he says, your father is even bigger than the Maharal. He said, why? He said that the Maharal created a golem that couldn't talk, and your father made a golem that can't talk, he said. Nachanes, the kid didn't understand what the Rabbi said. What he said. So, we have all the stories about the golem, right? He sent the golem to get water, and which she wasn't supposed to. He told his wife, or he told his daughter, only the golem is only to be used. They didn't know he was a golem. They just thought he was a regular golem. He's only used for the Rebbe's attendant, and one day she said, you're doing nothing, go bring water for the basement, to clean the basement. So he brought water, and water, and water. She never told him to stop. And when the water was pouring out of the roof on the third floor, everybody came running. And the famous story that they sent Yasel golem to get fish on Erev Shabbos, because there was no fish, and he walked into the huge, everyone was scared to walk into the river, because it was overflowing in the winds and the hurricane. He just walked into the river with a huge sack and stood there. And instead of getting a couple of fish for Shabbos, he waited for the huge sack to be filled. So now that it's filled with thousands and thousands of fish, they come running and ask him, where's the golem? And he says, what's with you, you golem? We don't need all that fish. He spills out the entire sack, empties the entire contents. And as the story goes, that the Maharal said, you see, you're not supposed to use him for any other purpose other than what he was literally created for. And you have all the other stories. The golem always beat his opponent, except for when he was fighting with somebody in the mirror. Then there was nothing left of that mirror. And then, of course, there's the famous legend of the golem. The golem is in the attic of the Al Tanai Shul. By the way, you know what? It's Al Tanai Shul. People think it's Al Tanai, old new. No, it's not. It's the Al Tanai Shul. It was built Al Tanai, that it doesn't have that you have the variances in the halachas of Beis HaKnesses. So the famous attic in Prague, everyone is scared to go up there because the golem is supposed to be buried there. There's even a story that the Nazis tried to go in there, and they're petrified, they turned, they ran for their lives. And if you go into the attic of the Al Tanai Shul, don't tell me, somebody once told me, he snuck up, and it's covered with shemus. They buried the golem of shemus. Okay? So, did the golem exist, or did the golem did not exist? Somebody said, of course the golem exists. So many people are named after him, right? Was there a golem? You know all the lines. So, was there a golem? I don't know if there was a golem, but there definitely is now, right? Heard somebody once said, even if there was a golem, I'm an anical of the golem. You tell me he didn't exist. He says, somebody once came to a certain town. He said, I'm an anical. He was a con artist. He says, you know who I am? Everyone crowds around. He says, I'm an anical of the doiver shekarim. Really? You're an anical of the doiver shekarim, So everyone came and they brought him money and kedyanis. And after a while, which literally means speak a lie, doiver shekarim, and after a while, they saw the way he was acting. He didn't look like he was an anical of the doiver shekarim, Somebody came over to him and said, tell me the truth, are you really an anical? Are you really a grandchild of the doiver shekarim? So he said, truth? I'm really the doiver shekarim himself, but I'm an onav, I'm modest, so I'm saying that I'm just an anical. Now, there is a common understanding that all those stories about the golem, with Thaddeus, with the prison, with the monasteries, with everything else, there is a common understanding that those stories are fiction. And they were actually written by, who was the one who wrote Sherlock Holmes?
Conan Doyle.
Right. So he was that's pretty much an accepted thing. That those stories are just as stories are, and as storytellers are. They just came down. There's no basis of truth to it. That's the understanding. They say they shouldn't have been. They brought him once one of these storybooks of the golem, he threw it on the floor. There's a whole issue about whether that indeed that was true or not. So when it comes to storytellers, they sometimes tend to exaggerate. As I remember many years ago, when I was a learning Rabbi in Camp Aguda, so I found this great long story in an old Yiddish book. So you got to find these old Yiddish books when no one knows the story, and it's this old Yiddish you can hardly read, like a different dialect. That's the best place to get stories from. You don't have to worry to chaperine before they translate it. That's the best place. So I remember I said this long story, and I said it for years in my learning group in Camp Aguda, last 10 minutes every single day. And I said it for so many years, I got sick of the story myself. So I was looking for some type of a new story, but I had to find like a story that no one knows, a geschmack story that I could use. So finally I find this old storybook and I start reading it, and I say, this is a great story. And it took me like halfway through the story to realize this was the original story that I read. But what happened was, every single year I just added a little part to it, took off a little bit, added a little bit, so by the time I was reading it again, I can go back to square one and start all over, like the story of life is. Somebody told me that he heard from one of Rabbi Victor Miller's Zecher Tzadik L'Bracha's Einiklach, that the children, when one of his grandchildren was playing Monopoly a very long time. He said, "How long are you playing Monopoly?" He said, "Grandfather, I'm embarrassed. I'm playing it for almost 7 hours." He says, "You don't have to be embarrassed." He says, "Some people play it for 70 years, he says. At least, he says, at the end of your game, you're going to put all the pieces in the box." He says, "Some people play it for 70 years, then they put them into the box." That's the story. All right, so, as storytellers go, the story changes. They say there were 2 Hasidim once of, each one was saying different moifsim of their Rebbe. You know what the Sanzer Rav once said? The Sanzer Rav once said that a Chasidisha be'einai re'isi is a Litvisha be'azni shemas. He says, and a Chasidisha be'azni shemas is like hayat dvarim mi'olam, he said. We'll translate that a different time. Sanzer Rav once said about the Baal Shem Tov stories, he says that if you believe that they cannot happen, that's epikursis. If you believe they did happen, you're a fool. Right? The truth is somewhere in between. So they say these 2 Hasidim were saying different moifsim of their Rebbe. So one of them said that my Rebbe sat down by Shalosh Sudais, and he didn't expect such a big crowd. He had Yud 12 Chalas. The Rebbe's have Yud Beis Chalas, Al Pi Kabbalah. And so many Hasidim came, he just kept taking Chalas out of the bag, giving it out. And out of these 12 Chalas, we counted, eventually he gave out 150,000 Chalas. The other one said, "What? You won't believe that story? I don't believe that story. That's ridiculous. That's absurd." Then he started telling a story about his Rebbe. That they went out for Kiddush Levana, and there was no Levana, and my Rebbe moved his pachayla, his scarf, back and forth, and there were 1,000 Levanas there. It was, "What, 1,000 moons? You liar, you liar." But let's negotiate. He says, "I'll come down with 75,000 bilkalach, and you come down with at least 500 Levanas." Okay, let's negotiate this a little bit. Okay. So the emes is that what is the argument that there was no golem? That there was a golem. The Gemara talks about Yosef Shidai, and there actually are different stories of those that created golems, which you won't go into tonight, which is more well documented than the Maharal's golem, but the Maharal's golem is the one that has the souvenirs in Prague. Some taina that in all of the Maharal's writings, you don't see Kabbalah Maisius. Although the Maharal was a tremendous Mekubal, but you don't see him giving you instructions how to create golems. Or other inyanim of Kabbalah, the shameless or different things that are needed. Some say that the Taisus Yamtiv, who was the biggest Talmud of the Maharal, we understand, and was a prolific writer, and writes about his Rebbe with unbelievable Mesiras Nefesh, the whole Yisoid of learning Mishnayos, which came from the Maharal, and the Maharal has a whole Mahalach. There are Maharal schools now that are starting, the way children are supposed to be taught. First Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, and then first the Chamisha Kamish Torah, first Tanakh, then Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, and there's a whole movement and an Indian in that. So the Taisus Yamtiv, who's the great Talmud of the Maharal, mentions nothing about the golem. Which, if the golem was the great golem that he was, there should have been some recognition of the writings of the Taisus Yamtiv, as others would argue. However, the Maharal and the Sefer Ber HaGoyla, and the Chassam Sofer brings it in Masechtes Chulin, writes as follows. There's a Gemara in Masechtes Chulin that says that the power of Kishuf, the power of magic, is Machchish Pamal Yishal Maila. It distorts the ongoings in heaven. Kumt the Maharal in the Sefer Ber HaGoyla, and he writes as follows. I'll let you judge. Says the Maharal, those people that are Isaac in various different Kabbalistic formulas through the Sefer Yetzirah. The Sefer Yetzirah is the Sefer that Kadosh Baruch Hu gave to Adam Arishain, and it has in it the codes how the world was created. That's not a contradiction to what's going down in Shemayim, says the Maharal. The world was created through putting together the letters of the Torah. As the Chayzer says, Bereshis bara lekim es Hashemayim va'aretz. Bereshis bara lekim es. First Hashem created Aleph to Tav, and then the Torah. So therefore, you're basically emulating Ma'aseh Bereshis. You're working within existing powers of Hashras Hashchina that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put into this world, says the Maharal. So there's no problem using the Sefer Yetzirah. Now, the Maharal is not saying that he made a golem. And he's definitely not giving us instructions how to use it. But we do see in concept that perhaps the Maharal was close to such an inyan. I heard this story from Rav Vosner's son, L'zayin Gesund Stark. He said that his father, Rav Vosner L'zayin Gesund, was a Talmud of Rav Meir Shapiro in Lublin, and there was a Mashgiach, a famous Mashgiach in Lublin. His name was, anyone? Shimala Zalachav. And he was a very big Makobel, and he had a Sashir in Sefer Yetzirah, And he said that once he said the wrong thing or turned the wrong page by mistake, and a chicken popped out. He said, "Oops!" No, like, put that back. That's what he said, something like that. They said there was a chicken running around. Everyone said, "That chicken, where did it come from?" So it seems that the Maharal had some affinity, some he was defending the Sefer Yetzirah. Now, there was a man by the name of Rabbi Yudel Rosenberg, or Rabbi Yidel Rosenberg, who was a Rav in Poland. And he claims to have found it. Well, he definitely found it. I shouldn't say he claimed. He found in a museum documentation. The question is if the documentation is authentic. And over there, he writes an entire story. Supposedly, there's a letter that the Maharal wrote to another contemporary Rav in his time, Rabbi Yaakov Ginsburg, who was a Rav of a certain city. I forgot the name of the city. And he writes different shilas to this Rav, like was the golem mechuyev in mitzvahs or not, He goes on to describe that he may have to make this golem because of the tsaris that was happening over there. Again, the letter was found in a museum. Others doubt it. There's a sefer Imre Yosef from the Spinka, the Chakel Yitzchak, his son, put into the Hakdama, also parts of that letter. Where over there, supposedly the Maharal writes that with the terrible tsaris that were going on, the allegations, the pogroms, that he made a shalas cholam, which al pi Kabbalah, you write a certain question and you put it underneath your pillow and you get an answer in your dream. And in his dream, the Maharal saw the first 10 letters of the Aleph Beis, which he interpreted as Ata Bara Golem and so on. I once read someplace, I don't know if this is true, that the koiches of Kishiv try to draw from the koiches of Kedusha. What is when a kid wants to say magic, what does he say? What are the words abracadabra, right? That's Aleph Beis Gimel, Dalet, abracad, something that comes from the original, somehow, the koiches of Kishiv. Okay, so let's not get into this, because the last thing I need is for a chicken to start running around over here. Now, Kapara says next week. Okay. In this letter, the Maharal writes, he saw the letters Aleph Beis Gimel, and he created the golem, and he goes on to explain how he created the golem. He said he called his son-in-law Rabbi Yitzchak HaKayin and his Talmud of Aaron, and he explained that everything in this world, which is brought down in the Kabbalah Svarim, is a composition of the 4 Yesodis: Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Ofer. Eish is fire, Ruach is wind, Mayim is water, Ofer is dust. And he told each one of his Talmidim, your Eish, or your Ruach, or your Mayim, I don't remember who was what, who in the Maharal himself was 2 out of the 4, and therefore, as a combination, each one had to purify themselves and fast, and toivel themselves, and then be mechav in certain shemus, and they drew an image of a person in the mud, and they walked around 4 times, and each one said a whole pismin, and all of a sudden, boom, the golem, a very confused golem, got up, and they had to explain to him why he was brought down to this world. It's interesting to note, the Mishnah Berurah that brings I think from the Chacham Tzvi, who was the father of Rabbi Yaakov Emden, who has a shayla taka, if a golem that was created with a Sefer Yetzirah, you could be mitzaref him to a minyan. A lot of people out there would like bigger minyanim, so I guess if this gets out of hand, we can really get into trouble. Okay, now, still, there are those who question the authenticity of these letters and all of it. So, Rabbi Sai, let's try to approach this, what the lessons are over here on a practical level. It's brought down in the Shari Kedusha from Reb Chaim Vital that the 4 Yesodos, Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Ofar, are really the emotions of a person. And Eish corresponds to Gaiva, because fire rises, and also Kas. When a person is angry, his entire body is aflame. When a person is a Balgaiva, he is Nichshel in the inyan of Eish. He's Poigim in the inyan of Eish. A person who is a complete Anav, the Koyach of Eish, has no shlita over him. It says the Sefer Ber Shmuel, he was a Talmud of the Ksav Sefer. You see by Avram Avinu, Anochi Offer the Efer, he's the first simon of Anivus, and Avram Avinu survives the fire in Ur Kasdim. There's a Gemara in Bava Metzia that says Reb Zera means small, right? That Anivus Rezi'ira was his Inyan, and he came to Eretz Yisrael, he was you would think somebody comes from someplace else, you want to show off what a great tzaddik you are? No, he was mispalel to forget all of his learning, so that he should easily be able to be makabel the Torah, the new Torah. So he's like the epitome of a nivus, that is Reb Zera. Reb Zera was tired, the thing we just learned in the Gemara. He stood outside to be able to be mekayim the mitzvah of standing up for Talmidei Chachamim. So Reb Zera, I don't suggest you do this, used to climb into an oven to test whether the fire would have any effect on him. And the fires had no effect on him until once the Chachamim saw, and it was ayin har, and he burnt a little bit his feet. So that's the inyan of Eish and Gaiva. There's ruach, which is the koyach of dibur. Mayim represents taiva, because this makes all sweet things grow. Yosef HaTzadik was not affected by water. Ma'ara hayam vayonais. Why did the Yamsuf split? Because it saw the orain of Yosef HaTzadik, who mastered over taiva. Afar is atzlus, depression, being lazy. Nachem ish gamzu was always happy, always mardik b'simcha. Everything is gamzu l'taiva. So therefore, when they changed the gold for the dust, what happened to the dust? The dust turned into arrows. Because if somebody masters over atzlus, and atzlus dust cannot hurt him. Also, the Gemara says in Masechtas Taanis that he was very sick, and the building started to cave in, and he told them, first take out the kalim, and then me, because as long as I'm here, the building will not cave in on me, because he knew that he mastered over atzlus and atzlus. Even though he took that upon himself because he was late giving the poor person the food, so just the opposite. Because his inyan was always rizos, so there was a tiny pagam in it, he took upon himself the worst onish. So now, what we have to understand is that through our emotions, when you get angry and you scream and you yell, it's kilu oived by the zara. What's the oived by the zara? So it's brought down because you create an image. You create a koyach of tumah. Ruach, when we say the wrong things and you speak lashon hara and you say something very nasty and you create a machloikis, see the Chafetz Chaim mentions it many times. You create a tangible reality. You create a malach that prosecutes in a terrible way. Every time you do an aver, you create a malach. But if the malach is created by lashon hara, he's an expert at prosecution. So on and so on. So all these inyanim, we create this with who we are. We're constantly making golems. We just don't see them. They're happening. Schar mitzvah, schar aveira, aveira. What does that mean? Says the Nefesh HaChaim, you do a mitzvah, you create a tangible reality that drives you to do another mitzvah. And you are over an aveira, you create a tangible reality that drives you to do another aveira. Says the Sefer, my father used to tell me the story that the Baal Shem Tov once walked early in the morning and he met Reb Chaim's sons, and not the sons of Rav. This goes back generations beforehand. He was a big misnaga. He said, you sat last night in the sukkah, the Baal Shem Tov told him, it was wee hours in the morning. And he said to him, you spoke Lashon Hara on me. He says, I'm moichel you, but you sit in the sukkah and you speak Lashon Hara. So this Reb Chaim's sons says, there's nobody else up in town. So one of the people there must have told you. So that's Lashon Hara and Rechilas. You were Makabalit. He says, no, I didn't hear from anybody. He says, how do you know? He says, well, I see the Malach was created by him. And he told me, I see him. Which is very important for us to understand. We come up to Shemaim after 120 years, we're not going to start arguing over what we did or what we didn't do. It's there in the living flesh. It's right here. This is it. This is the mitzvah, this is the Aveir. Says the Sefer time of the Aveir. Lo yasa adam avain, a person does not commit a sin, shlo yivra mashchis, a destructive force is created. Oiver aveira, you're over an aveira, kind of like a tegerachis. It's like getting your own personal prosecutor. Hello, IRS, please audit me. Come over here. Here I am. You know, what are you doing? By speaking Lashon Hara. Okay? Pliny Asani, so-and-so did me. The ain beria miskayemes ela it's really not, it's not a comparison. It's not an audit. It's worse than an audit. An audit is will check you out. A prosecution looks for prosecution. It's worse than that. It's not even a good analogy. The ain beria miskayemes ela b'shafoy shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Here's the problem. You create all these malachim with your mitzvahs and averis. Someone has to feed them. Every malach needs nourishment. That's what the Sefer Time of the Devar says. A malach needs nourishment. A malach needs nourishment? Yeah. And he nourishes off you. So the Chafetz Chaim says, parnasa, good business. Why is it not going? Where's the money disappearing? You created forces that somehow are being yoinik from it. These are things that we don't understand. The Arizal says, you make a bracha, so your good malach is nourished from that food. You eat the food, he gets the ruchnius. This is very, a lot of people used to be that way. They would invite someone, tell you say Advat Torah and I eat the food. Give them the ruchnius. That's not what it means. Is it right? It says that's why a person makes a bracha, it's gili goizel. If you don't make a bracha, what does the Gemara say? It's like you're stealing from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean you're stealing from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So if you look in Rashi, you're learning the daf, so Rashi says you're stealing, Rashi doesn't say you're stealing the whole hashpah. Because what happens is, by not making a bracha, these forces that you create have to draw their mezainis from someplace else. So you're diminishing your whole hashpah. So here's the point, says the time of the Devar. I created this mashchis. Yoy, look at this guy. Even though the Rebbe of Zisha said he never saw a whole malach from an aveir of a yid. He's missing a wing, missing an eye. Because when you do an aveir, you go, a little crack, it's a little, and okay, one day I'm going to stop. But that takes away from the brunt of the mouth. But this guy still says, feed me! You created a monster, feed me! So the Rebbe should say, why should I feed you? Go to this guy. So when the Kadosh Baruch Hu feeds him, that's the time of the virus says. The Kadosh Baruch Hu actually supports these mashchisim, and the malachim say, what are you doing? Well, Hashem, excuse me, why are you doing this? And he says, because I want to give the person a chance to do tshuva. Okay? So now, in the dominant nisyonis that we have, we create these koiches of eish, these koiches of mayim, when we're nichshol in taiva, koiches of eish when we're nichshol in anger, koiches of ruach when we're nichshol in dibur, and when we get into a depression that we can't fight, or not trying to fight it, we're human beings, so we create these koiches through afar and so on. What the Maharal did, what he's explaining in this letter, whether it ever happened or not, but the concept is that the Maharal took these koiches, took tzaddikim that never got angry, took tzaddikim that were able to stay clear of taiva, and they were able to focus like a laser these forces and create a positive entity. But we're doing it all the time. We've mentioned very often, Rabbi Tzaddik says, that generally people that have an assignment, they're constantly angry, have less of an assignment with taiva. People that are overwhelmed by taiva have less of an assignment of kas, because they're two dominant forces, although you can have both. And therefore, says Rabbi Tzaddik, you have a taiva, and you stop it, you sequester that taiva, that tangible reality that potentially would have been the taiva is converted to bracha, and particularly to parnasa. And that's why Yosef Tzaddik was so rich. A person, for every time you walk on the street and you close your eyes, you just created a positive reality that is going into your credit column, that is converted into bracha. You want to get angry and you don't scream, I had it! And you go, whoop! I have it. Baruch Hashem, a beautiful family, everything is okay. You change the had to have. That kas is converted to bracha. May not be instant. It's like a soda machine, but it happens. You created that power. We mentioned that Baal Shem Tov once said that a woman just davened mincha and saved the whole world from a terrible gzeira. They went to find this woman. They thought they were going to find the biggest Baba Sadar or Rebbitzin in the world. You know, with knows Kabbalah. She was a simple woman. And she says that she was so angry at her husband. She walked in with all the mud and everything. She was about to pick up the frying pan and she said, please help me, please, please. That mincha saved the world. We didn't understand. So we all interact with this eish, with this ruach, with this mayim, with this offer. We do it all the time. We're always issuing with golems. We don't know what we're creating. The positive and negative forces. And when you do tshuva meyahava, what does that mean? That your aveira turns into a schus. It means that this negative mashchis that was driving you to do aveiros is turned into a schus. Now we mentioned many times, it's important to bring up. I once had a kid who told me that my Rabbi told me that if you have bad thoughts, and you're over certain aveiros, every time you do a mitzvah, the Satan grabs it away. See, the kid was like, I don't know what to do. Should I make a bracha? He imagined this like little teddy bear Satan. Everything, Baruch, Ata, Hashem, Lekenu, Melech, Shahaka. The time he says, Nia B'Dvara, he's destroying the world. He says, if I do good, I'm not good, I'm not good. Well, I don't know what, so I asked around, what do you tell this kid? So someone showed me the stipler. Somebody writes to the stipler. This Baruch says, I read in one of these svarim that if a person's over certain aveiros, all of your mitzvahs go to the Sitra Achra. Your Torah goes to the Sitra Achra. What happens? So the stipler writes to him, don't look at those svarim. You don't know what they're talking about. But now that you look, let me explain it to you. What does that mean the Torah goes to the Sitra Achra? There's no such a thing. Every word of Torah that you learn is your credit. Every mitzvah that you do is your credit. The Kabbalistic doesn't cancel offset mitzvahs and aveiros. Does not work that way. Your mitzvahs are mitzvahs, your aveiros are aveiros. Much doesn't offset one from the other. What does it mean your Torah goes to the Sitra Achra, up the stipler? You sit down to learn at night. I'm going to learn Daf Yomi. And you open up the Gemara, the first daf goes great. And as the dafim go on, it goes till Bo Shabbos, Bo Menucha, and half the people are out. Right? You know, because usually you look in the Svarim Shank, when the Daf Yomi cycle starts, you cannot find the Brachas Gemara for nothing. Right? 10 blot down, you find an isolated Gemara. When they're up to like the 5th parak, you find 3 Gemaras. When it comes to the Schachter Shabbos, the first day you can't find the Gemara. By the second day, you have all the Shabbos Gemaras there. By the time you get to Zvachim and Menachos, you have no problem finding a Gemara on the Svarim. Right? So you know exactly how things work. Now, so what happens is, you start learning with a geschmack, and then the Yitzhar says, I'm scared of this Torah. And all of a sudden he makes you very uncomfortable, and you start getting, itchy, and you go to the water and the coffee and the this and the that, and things start changing and changing and changing and changing, and it's very hard for you to learn, and you say, tomorrow I'll skip this plot, I'll start the next plot, and then, maybe I should learn better Mishnayos, maybe I should better learn with my kids, maybe, and you learn nothing. So a guy says, no, it's so hard for him to learn, he pushes it through, comes the next night, it's much easier. Comes the next night, much easier. Comes the third night, it's Mari de Geschmack! Because what happens, every time you break through, you create a positive entity that drives you to learn more. You over certain Aveiros, you know what happens? Says the Stipler. You know what it means? The Sitra Achra, the Koyach HaTumah grabs your bracha. It means that 5 dafim down the road, 5 months down the road, it's as hard for you to open the Gemara as it is the first time. It's not easy for you to open the Gemara. You don't get that Geschmack. But not that you don't have the schar for the limit at Torah. You keep pushing through, you break that through as well. Chaim Kreisworth, he was the Rav in Antwerp. So he said he was in those days at Chaim Yeshiva he was by. He was by Chaim Meiser, I think. But in that yeshiva, only the top Bachrim had dormitory rooms. Everyone else was like, find yourself a place to go home. So he had a room. So there was never a Bacher that couldn't see a blind Bacher. So someone didn't know what to do with him. So they brought him to the dormitory and just dumped him there. The kid is sitting there and they're all like, what do we do with you? So he said he got off his bed and he took to put the Bacher on his bed. It was going to be for one night, but the Bacher didn't have where to go. And he wound up, I think, for 3 years, and Chaim slept on the floor and he slept on the bed. Because eventually when the Germans surrounded the yeshiva, they ordered all the Bachrim to come out, and one by one they lined him up on a Schachter. And they said as they lined him up against the wall, so he said, I slept on the floor all these years for this Bacher. Now I'm going to lay on the floor and die. And for whatever reason, the German said to him, you're so young. He says, I'm going to shoot around you and you run for your life. And he shot around him and he ran. Why did that German see Tab Rachmanis on him? We don't know what we create with a chesed, and we don't know how HaKadosh Baruch Hu saves that chesed for the right time. Now, that's what it means when it comes to Rosh Hashanah. Kol boy oilam oivim l'fanav kibnei merayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings us through like sheep. Like sheep? Can we think of a nicer way of talking about people? Not that there's anything wrong with sheep. But the point is, whatever we have, it refers to all of the powers that we create. Because Baruch Hu is not just counting the people. He's counting the entities that we created by our mitzvahs and by our averos. So, I once read a report that they claim that the Democrats are very lax in immigration. They want to give them citizenship because these people are going to vote Democratic. That's why they want to give them citizenship. So I said, we have to do the same thing. We have to be dam people of kavschos, so we create a lot of koichos that are going to be on our side when it comes to Rosh Hashanah. We have to create a lot of people that are going to be there, that are going to work with us. So someone told me a story today, that he was invited in the back by President Bush to the Hanukkah party there. When they make a big Hanukkah party, he was invited, he shook the president's hand, they took a picture, and he was so proud. And he said, he went around showing it to everybody. Everyone said, oh, you were by the Wax Museum? I said, no, this is the real president. Yeah, sure. He said, what was the point? No one believed him. He said, maybe I've gone straight to the Wax Museum. What's real and what we create, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows. Now the word golem, you know what golem really means? Golem really means unfinished. Look in the Sechtes Kelim. Golem klei matches. The word golem means here's the power of Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Offer. And what do you do with it? So, you're going to ask me a kasha. You're going to say, Shkoyach, the Maharal's a big tzaddik. He knows how to take the Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Offer, create a golem. It's going to save Klal Yisrael. What do I do? He says, you don't have to know nothing. But you have to know that when you want to get angry at your wife, you want to get angry at your husband, you want to scream, you're so furious, you can't remember how many times do I have to say it, then guess what? Right now, not the Maharal, Hashem sent the Koyach HaEsh to you. What are you going to do with it? What kind of golem are you going to create with it? When you're walking on the street and you have a taiva, you're sitting alone at night and you're playing with the computer and your bills, and all of a sudden you're like slipping into something which somehow gets through the filter. The Rebbeinu Shem sent you now the koyach hamayim, and you are creating either one kind of a golem or another. We're doing the same thing that the Maharal did. Hashgacha lends us. And not only that, it interrelates. It's connected to each other in a way that we can hardly understand. That if there's someone knocking on my door that needs help, if I'm stopping on the road to help someone, if I have to help my kid, if I have to help a next door neighbor, if I have to be mechazik someone or drive someone to the hospital, Rahman al-Islam, or whether it's money or bein begufay, bein b'mamayna, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu is putting His ruach and your eish and His mayim all together. So the person calls and says, I need a taiva, not now, lay me off, not now, because Baruch is putting this golem together now for your sake. What do you mean, not now? Now's when it's happening. So if Shlamka Zavil, in Zavil, his daughter was very ill, and the doctor said there's no hope. So he made a cheshbon nefesh, and he said, I know what I have to do. And he ran to a lady that owed so much money to the town Gamach, you can't imagine. Whenever somebody dared to ask her for the money, she gave him Kal Tzevarim, she gave him Sheva Brachas and the Meya Brachas and the Meya Kailas all together. So he knocked on this lady's door and said, it's time to pay up. And she blasted him from head to toe. And he just smiled and said, okay. And he walked back, and the doctor said, your daughter's much better now. He said, I needed that Yesoida offer. I needed those Bizyonis now. I have to go looking for the Bizyonis. I have to go looking for it. Rav Gedalia Moshe Zavil, when he was in 48, they were in a Miklat in Eretz Yisrael. And there was a man there that was driving people crazy. Imagine, they're in a little box, it's hot, bombs are falling, people are crying, and he would go over and say, you really should lose weight. You're like, not now, He didn't stop. Look, your shirt is untucked. It's so uncomfortable to be with you, you have bad breath. They went to her, they said, we got to get him out of here! So he said, no, Shemai Fanat. He says, driving us crazy. He's a roidef. He said, no, Shemai Fanat. And when they walked out later, this was Kamat, the only Miklat in that area that wasn't hit. And Rav Gedalia Moshe Zavil said, that's why, don't you understand what we were going through with him? That was Mesakin within us, the Koyach of Eish Mayim, an offer that saved us. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu does it for us. It's called life. And the Nisyanis of life that direct the Eish Ruach Mayim and offer to the right place. So there was the Maharash. The Maharash was the son of the Tzemach Tzedek, and he had a chassid that there was a woman that worked in the house, and her husband was drafted into the Polish army, never came back. She was in Aguna for many years, and his wife kept saying, "Talk to the Rebbe, talk to the Rebbe." I go to the Rebbe, I tell him my problems, but maybe this is also your problem. If there's a woman in our house that's crying, so once he came to the Rebbe and said, "Rebbe, can we do something for this Aguna?" So the Rebbe said like this: "My father, the Tzemach Tzedek, he was very, very good at it." And I was like, let me tell you a story of the Tzemach Tzedek. He said a story about his father, that there was a woman in the house that worked there. She worked over there. And her husband disappeared. No one knew where she was. And she would cry and cry and cry and cry. And finally once, the rabbis of the Tzemach Tzedek came in and said, we could help everybody. We can't help this lady that works in our house. So he said that, I don't know. She said, thousands of people come to you for brachas. I don't know where her husband is. Why are all these people coming to you? So who says I know where their husbands are? They just come. So tell them not to come. Tell them the whole thing is a fraud then. That's not really a fraud. Not really a fraud, so find his husband. It's not for rabbits in here. So find her. So he said, listen, his lashon was the Neiper, the river is not burning. When the time comes, the time comes. He said, when? He says, over Yom Tov. Sarsi made tshuva, he told his Gabbai that when a certain chassid, Mechel, comes, send him into me. Mechel came Chalamoy. And Mechel was so happy, he rented 2 rooms for Simchas Torah, Shana Rabbah, Simchas Torah, Shmiyat Tzais, he was jumping for joy, and now the Rebbe calls him in, doesn't get any better than this. And the Rebbe told Mechel, I have a letter for you, I want you to deliver it to Chaikel. He said, Rebbe, sure, right now. No, but after that, I won't be able to be back for the second day's Yom Tov. Right. But I rented these 2 rooms, right. But after, right now. Right now. Now. And he went home, he was Tzibrachim. And I told him, the Rebbe's sending me away. I rented 2 rooms. The Rebbe's sending me away for Yom Tov. I just left over. They said, the Rebbe's sending you on a shlichus. That's not sending you away. Just the opposite. You're closer to the Rebbe than you were before. He didn't buy that. He didn't buy that much. The Belzerov once said, I have a chassid. The guy's name was Melech Rumpler, I think. He said, he's a real chassid. Because once all the chassidim were traveling to Belz, and there was a terrible storm, they all got stuck in a hotel someplace, or some mud pile, and a few rich chassidim came by, and they said, we have covered powerful wagons. They took some selected chassidim, they said, Melech, come on, you come to the Rebbe. So Melech stayed. He said he got onto the wagon, jumped off, and ran back. And all Yom Tov, the Rebbe was saying, I have one real chassid, his name is Melech. So he asked Melech, what did you do? He said, I was thinking, all these people are left alone in this barn, away from their families, they're going to be so depressed over Yom Tov. What does the Rebbe Hashem want me to do? Does he want me to go to the Rebbe, or does he want me to go to help them? So I said, I'm a chassid, I go to the Rebbe. And I said, why do I go to the Rebbe? To learn how to serve Hashem. So I jumped off the wagon, I ran back to them. And I spent Yom Tov with them. Sometimes when you're sent away, that's the real shlichus. Okay. So he has no brera, he leaves. I'll leave. Everything will go my way now, because I left. He leaves and there's a terrible storm. And one of his horses dies. Another one of his horses dies. He barely makes it back. He's drenched and soaked. He gets home with Shana Rabbis. Why did you come back for? Don't ask. And he gets on the he climbs onto the oven to warm up, and they come to tell him that his thing is burning and his granary is burning, and this is happening, and the whole world's caving in on him. He goes, "What? The Rebbe sends me away, and everyone's caving in on me." His wife says, "Oh, why did the Rebbe send you? To deliver a letter." She said, "Well, deliver the letter, you chacham." So he rents a third horse because his two horses died. Erev Shana Rabbah, and he goes down to Fischel. Fischel opens the letter, and the letter says, "Send me your grinder and your mill." So he goes to the grinder, and he says, "Here's a letter, go straight to the Rebbe." So the Rebbe, he says, "What do I have with the Rebbe?" He says, "Go straight to the Rebbe, not your fire." No, he has with the Rebbe. So he comes to the Rebbe says to him, "Why do you run away from your wife?" He says, I didn't have parnasa for her. He said, "I'll make sure you get a raise." "Why do you run away from your wife?" She goes, "She's a Russia." So, "Why is she a Russia?" Because she didn't make you enough supper. Now that you have money, she'll make you more supper. "Well, she's ugly." "She's ugly? Why? Maybe you're ugly, the way you think." She says, "Go back there and live a normal life." If you're a Rebbe, you can do that. In regular Shalom Bayis counseling, I'm not sure that works that way. But when Maisa, it did. They went back and he got the message. Okay? So the Marash turned around and said, "What do I tell this lady?" He said, "We're going to make an investigation where her husband is." And they found out that her husband was killed in the war, and the Bezin got Eidim, and they passed him that she's mutter. It would be nice if every story had a happy ending. So I want to ask you, why did he repeat the story of the Tzemach Tzedek? So Pashat Schus Avos, also to ingrain that everything is Hashgacha. So a tzaddik of a generation before could have seen more. Everyone interrelates with each other. This chassan had to go through the tsar being sent away from the Rebbe, of losing money. All the Eish Ruach Mayim and the offer in the world connects in such a way that we are Makayim our shlichus in this world and our tikkun. And that's why we can't deny Hashgacha. You can't run away from what Hashem serves you on the plate. You have to deal with your family, your wife, your husband, your children. It's your Eish Ruach Mayim offer. So says the Bnei Yissaschar Ma'ir de Gazach. Comes Elul, we're all under pressure. Admission cards and paying for Yom Tov and the family issues. And those that are single parents, the pain of Yom Tov is so great. And when Chas v'Shalom, the parents in the hospital, people go through a lot during this month. Zok the Bnei Yissaschar, look here. How much water do you have to have in a mikveh? You have to have mem sa, 40 sa of water. How much is a sa? Okay, mem sa is enough for it. So somebody once told me this simon. It's a great simon. Those of you in my class remember it maybe. It's called, these two words remember, Askalov Gudai. Okay, this is where it goes. 1 ephah is 3 sa. Okay, 1 sa is 6 kav. 1 kav is 4 lug. 1 lug is 6 bay. All right, an ephah is 3 sa is 6 kav, a kav is 4 lug, and a lug is 6 bay. Now, let's go a little bit weiter. Okay, so how many? So if a sa is 6 kav in a sa, and there's 4 lug in a kav, so how many lug are in a sa? Okay, I asked this to my 12th grade class a couple of years ago. They said, "Well, we're doing trigonometry and advanced calculus. We really don't know this stuff." All right, so we know now that there are 24 lug in a sa. Now, so mem sa is how many lug? Mem sa is 24 times 40, 960 lug. Okay? Remember, what's the shear for Kiddush? A revius of a lug, a quarter of a lug. So a quarter of a lug is anywhere between 3 and 5 ounces. So we now know that in a mikveh there are 960 lug. Zok the Bnei Yissaschar. How many hours are there from Rosh Chodesh El through Yom Kippur? 40 days. 40 times 24, 960 hours. So he says, the Chidah talks about this as well. The whole Elul and the whole Seres Yimei Tshuva is like a mikveh. You're traveling yourself in a mikveh. Now, next. What is the significance of the number 960? There is a halacha in Hilchas Bittul that a beria doesn't become bottle. If I'm leaning over with an ice cream cone to see what's doing with the meat, and a drop of the ice cream falls in, depending on the circumstances, you go to the Rav says it's bottle b'shisha. If I'm leaning over, I hate to use this mashal, I can't think of a better one right now, and a mouse falls in, even though it's bottle b'shishim, you will not eat the meat for a variety of different reasons, but kashrus wise, no, a beria does not become, an entire creature does not become bottle. Okay? That's the gayos, let's say a person eats a whole grape. So there's a whole shaila, even though it doesn't have the shear, you may have to have a bracha achrayna because it's a beria doesn't need a shear. However, the Yerushalmi says that in a certain amount, even a beria becomes bottle. What is that amount, says the Yerushalmi? How much do you need For even a barrier, a whole creation to become batal, 960. If a whole barrier falls into 960 times the amount, it becomes batal. Zak de b'nei Yisascha. You do an aveira. You create a mashchis. You create a power, an entity of damaging. How do you mean mevatel it? How can I do tshuva? A barrier becomes batal in 960. It becomes batal in the days from Rosh Chodesh El to Yom Kippur if you want to do tshuva. It is powerful enough even to undo, to be mevatel the barrier. Which is why we read the Teichacha, as we will this week, the Musar, when? Prior to Rosh Hashanah. Because the Gemara says, Tich l'shana the kilisa. I told this mashal many times. Now, let's say I'm in the middle of the night, I have nothing to do, so I call the bank to see how my account is doing. And my kid is sitting down next to me. Happy, can I sit here? No problem. And the bank says, your checking account balance is $3,000. And the kid goes, wow, Daddy's so rich. And you're thinking, oh no, $3,000. I gave out a $2,000 check to the mortgage, a $1,500 check to insurance. Oh no. If one of those checks cleared, both those checks didn't clear yet, my checks are going to bounce. Oh no. And this kid is saying, my father's weird. This lady just said that he has $3,000. I'm going, oh no. Then he goes, okay, you want to put it, did the mortgage check go through, please? Check 242 for $2,000 has been taken from your account. You go, oh shoot. And the kid says, when they tell him he has $3,000, he goes, oh, he's right. When they say they took $2,000 from his account, he's happy. He says, what's with you? He says, you don't understand. I know they're going to take it. I'm happy they took it already. The inyan of Tich l'shana v'kil said we read the Teichacha before Rosh Hashanah because we know there's a certain amount of damage that we created. We want it to manifest itself. We want it to take place. The Shbal Zayda, we've mentioned this many times, the Shbal Zayda came to a certain town once and everybody was desperate. We need someone to read the Teichacha. Need someone to read the Teichacha? Yeah. There's different Hagim who reads the Teichacha. We're very scared about reading the Teichacha. So he says, well, who was reading it till now? He paid someone to do it. And what happened to him? What do you think happens when you come up to the Teichacha? He's dead. How old is he? 98. How many years was he doing it? Like 60. But eventually it caught up to him, you know what I mean? So the Shbal Zayda says, hey, I'll do it, okay? Give me the Teichacha. What? You're a young man. How you have a wife and kids? How could you? He says, on one condition, he says, you know, I want you to make a Talmud Torah in this town. You don't have to pay me. All right, and he wants to, before he changes his mind, let's go. Nebuch, okay, you know. By the way, Techrichim you can buy down the corner, you know. And he does the Teichacha, you know. That's it. Then he sees it going, he goes, who's taking care of the kaparas? Oh no, one who brings the kaparas. Oh boy, that's like a mess. Dangerous business, yeah? So-and-so did it. Really? Died. Yeah, how old was he? 103. Really? He did it only 80 years and that's it. Okay, I'll do it. On the condition you hire a new Rav in the town. So he did the Teichacha, he blew shayfer shana. Rabbi fixed up the entire town. Now, the very pacha, the very mashchis becomes batal and becomes a koyach ha'tayib if we want to commit ourselves. So we've mentioned this beforehand. The Gemara says, or the Zohar says, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda started to cry. He saw a bunch of doves flying around. He saw one dove flying behind the other doves. And he said, dove, dove, yaina, yaina, you were so trusted in the days of the Mabul. Go to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, he's hiding in the cave. We don't know where he is. He's hiding in the cave. We have a question. What's the question? The Teichacha appears twice in the Torah. Once in Bechikaisai and once in Kisav, in 6 parsha. In Bechikaisai, there's some words of Nechama afterwards. It's like consolement. Don't worry, it's not so bad. Hashem loves you. In Kisavai, Tsaris, and then boom. Don't worry. So please answer us. So they sent the dove, and the dove flew to Rav Shimon. And Rav Shimon saw the message on the dove, he began to cry. Who's going to answer them? And Eliyahu Navi came and said, let me tell you why. Write them back. That the Teichacha of Parshas Kisavai is Mishnah Torah that's before Mashiach. And the tsaris will be so great then, you can't have a consolement. Nobody could be able to explain it. But you know what the ultimate consolement is going to be? When Eliyahu Navi, when I will come, and I will show you that these very tsaris is the bracha. There's no consolement after the words of the Teichacha in this week's parsha, because this is going to be in the times of Mashiach, where we're going to see that the tzara itself is the bracha. That all the situations that we have to go through in life was to correct the Eish Ruach Mayim Afar in our life. So you know when the Maharal was born? The Maharal, they say that when he was born there was somebody going with a dead kid to dump him over there and make a blood libel on the Jews. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the Seder, his mother said, it's time. And there was a big Maharal, and everyone started running. And they started running, get him, get him. They were screaming, get the midwife. But this guy thought, get him. And he took off running with the sack. And the night watchman stopped him. And so the Maharal saved him right there with his birth. That's the story. Is the story of the golem true? You can argue it till Mashiach comes. Till the golem will come and tell you. But let me tell you a different story of the Maharal. Okay? He was engaged to marry a certain girl. Him and his brother were considered the greatest catchers of town. And his father-in-law was one of the biggest, Ashirim, one of the richest people in all of Klal Yisrael. Tremendous Baal Tzedakah. Then there was the war and the pogroms and fires, and his father-in-law lost every last penny. And he wrote a letter to the Maharal. I think she was 16, and at that time he was 18, and said, you can marry who you want. I don't have a red cent to my name. We've been reduced to nothing. We live in a tiny shack. I have nothing. I don't even have food for my family. And they right away they said to the Maharal, that's the way it went. Okay, next, sorry. And the Maharal says, how can I hurt her? How can I hurt this 16-year-old girl? I said, but there's no future. No! I said, as far as there's no way you can get married, there's no way to support yourself. There was no public assistance. You're going to die of hunger. So I'll wait. How long will you wait? Until I don't hurt her. She wound up, her parents were so hurt and broken that she rented an oven and she baked bread and she tried to bring food for her family. After many, many years and the wars that were going on at those times, so she's walking with her bread, she's bringing home whatever's left for her family to eat after she sold it for a few pennies, and a soldier comes running by and takes out his sword and grabs the bread out of her hands, sticks it and goes running with it. She said, if I was sane, I would have been happy he didn't kill me. But I knew how starving my parents are. I ran, I jumped up and caught onto the side of the horse. I was holding onto it as the horse was running. And I said to him, we are dying of hunger! And I'm a young girl sitting over here for years and years selling this bread! How dare you! And the soldier stopped and he was taken aback with what she said. He said, look, I'm also hungry. He said, here's a pouch. That's my payment for the bread. If I don't come back in 3 days, you can keep the pouch. After 3 days, she opened the pouch and it was full of gold coins. And she went to ask a shayla, she's allowed to keep it or not. And then she loaded, but this didn't happen overnight. Then they wrote a letter to the Maharal that she's ready to get married. I think by then the Maharal was 32 and she was 28. Okay? He waited not to hurt her. So let me tell you one thing. I told you that the Maharal is considered one of the main stations in Klal Yisrael who transferred the torch of Torah to the next generation. If it created a golem or not, you don't know and I don't know. But was he willing to sacrifice his very essence not to hurt a young girl? And because of that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a Klal Yisrael? That, my friends, is a fact.